Thank you for joining us today. My name is Bill Baker with Firestorm. Thank you so much for coming and joining us today on this cold day, or maybe it's your opportunity to buy a nice warm computer to be able to join us for this webinar. Today we're going to be discussing social media risk analysis, and we're pleased to have you with us. We'd like to invite you to become our friend. Firestorm Solutions is our Facebook account, and you can also follow us on Twitter at FirestormSoul. There is a hashtag for the session, Crisis Coach. Firestorm transforms crisis into value and empowers you to manage risk and crises. Firestorm's expertise is crisis management, critical decision support, crisis communications, crisis public relations, and consequence management. Keep in mind that this presentation is not complete without the accompanying oral comments and discussion, and the work product presented today by Firestorm must be considered in conjunction with your organization's personal counsel. In addition, do not interpret the comments or the content as legal advice or legal opinion. The Rochester Business Alliance is our co-host and sponsor for this Crisis Coach webinar series. This, I believe, is the 13th in the series that we do once a month. You can go to firestorm.com where you can watch past webinars and you can register for future webinars. How do you know what you don't know? That's our topic today. Jim Satterfield, president of Firestorm, will be the presenter. The webinar series is underwritten by our good friends at the Rochester Business Alliance. And we have, Jim, would you like to say nice things about the Rochester Business Alliance? Our friend Chip is not with us today.
Well, I'll jump in. If Chip was here, he would have a story and an insight. I've always been impressed by what he brings to the table and shares those insights. He has a meeting today, had a conflict and couldn't be with us, and so he'll be listening a little later on the recording. We're excited to continue the Rochester Business Alliance series that we've been doing, and as you've seen on this slide, the mission here is really to help people grow, provide information and expertise to help organizations in Western New York. And so we're always pleased to work with the Rochester area and the Western New York as this comes together. And if you need assistance in this area, Chip's got a great deal of expertise in helping businesses deal with issues. And like we're talking today, we're going to be talking about a tool that can use and provide you some insights as we move forward. One of the big constants that we all face in business is change. It changes at an accelerating rate. And that's probably not seen any more than in the social media area. It is the intelligence arm of your organization, and we're going to talk about that today and provide you some insights and show you really a lot about what's available and what you need to be doing, because it's a critical portion to create an intelligence network within your organization to understand what's happening. It's too late when you see somebody in this situation to know, is this a threat or not a threat that's coming into our company? But to know about this threat last week or a few days ago before it materializes within the organization is a good example of what can happen with the use of social media within your business. And it's not just a matter of doing a Google search or a word search or setting up a policy that says our employees won't say bad things about us or our customers within those areas. You have to be aware of what's being said. Firestorm is doing monitoring for a large number of clients in a variety of business environments, and it's an intelligence arm that can well tell you where the threats are before they materialize. So what's on social media today will be in your company tomorrow, and that's the concept that we want to think about. So as we think about this, predict, plan, perform, and we've talked about this process consistently here. The predict is understanding the vulnerabilities and threats, what are their impacts, how you monitor the triggers. The plans cover a wide range of areas, business continuity, IT disaster recovery, workplace violence. Social media risk is an area that regulators in certain verticals are now requiring a social media risk program in place. There are now consensus best practices and standards And if your organization doesn't have that, you're falling behind. And then in the perform is the training, the testing of plans, and the monitoring. So as we talk today about social media, we're going to talk about it in each one of these three areas as we go forward. Now, I think a lot of times when we focus on things, we run into disaster denial. And it's this quote out of the Dan Brown's latest novel that's just out, Inferno, based on Dante's Inferno. If you'll look at it, it really talks about the human mind has a defense mechanism that negates all realities that produce too much stress for the brain to handle. Denial is a critical part of the coping mechanism, and as you see it listed here, and it goes on. I think we're in denial in a variety of different ways when it comes to what's going on in social media. For those of you who maybe are not living your life on social media and pushing with your thumbs and typing those messages back and forth, you tend to discount this area and what it means. I was meeting with an organization this week, and we were talking about a concept called word blindness, and that's where it's like dyslexia. If you're looking at a sentence, you might omit a word. If the sentence had read, "Do not go home," it might be possible if you had dyslexia that you wouldn't see the word "not," and so the sentence would then read, "Do go home." And so when you don't see something that's there, that creates a problem. That's a blindness. And the key element that we're going to talk about on social media is seeing what's there today, because what's there on social media today will in fact be in your business tomorrow. So what's foreseeable? We're in an environment today where everything is foreseeable, and tomorrow anyone can be held accountable. If you had a disgruntled employee that you just terminated, and they made specific threats about coming back to work and taking specific actions against people, you would be expected to know about that, and you would be expected to have a plan associated with it. But if that threat was made on social media, how would you know? If you're not looking there, you're going to miss it. So when we think about this, is how do you know what you don't know? And it comes back to establishing an intelligence network within your organization. And there are three legs on this stool: anonymous reporting, both with emails and phone calls in, or text messages, or even the old-fashioned suggestion box to give you a way of coming forward. We find that only a very small percentages of threats within an organization are detected via anonymous reporting. But if it's one threat and you detect it in time, that can certainly make a difference within your organization. The second is a behavioral threat risk assessment program. That's the Bertha program, and we've talked about it before, and it's how do you deal with the individuals within the organization that's a concern. If you think about an organization that's growing, or maybe there's been an acquisition recently with lots of locations scattered around, it's going to be hard to know every single employee. So you have to build a structure in place to be able to identify those that are just normally on the low end, a discipline issue that you need to deal with through normal HR policies. Those at the upper extreme that are physical threats, that's where we would deal with calling 911 and getting the police involved. But it's that middle area where the behavioral threat risk assessment program comes in, evaluating those behaviors of concern. And we've talked about that, and we divide those between guarded, elevated, and severe to drive actions with it. But the last one is the one we're focused on today, and that's a social media risk program. That's where we're trying to understand, what are our customers saying about us? What are our contractors saying? What are our employees saying about us? Where is that information? What's actionable, and how do we carry that forward? So business intelligence is a term that's used a great deal. I quoted Wikipedia here. It's transforming raw data into meaningful and useful information. We want easily interpretation, identifies opportunities or threats, could easily be added, and it provides a predictive view. And so one of the things that we're going to talk about as we think about this today is, can you identify your organization's next crisis? And with social media, you can, and it may well be a key indicator for you as you look in each of these areas as we go forward. So if we're thinking about it, what we're looking for are warning signs. Can you really predict a crisis? Yes. But if someone was upset and they started making comments about it, we would need to respond to that within a very specific period of time. And so if we'd learned about these indicators, then we could take some actions as we carry forward. So this intelligence network is really letting us know today what's going to happen tomorrow. And it's this predict, plan, perform process and methodology that we've been discussing. And we're transforming uncertainty of what's going to be going on into certainty here and very specific metrics that can be established. We do this by defining a framework, identify the risk involved, and then manage and mitigate those risks. That approach is a standard one as we look at any of these areas to carry forward as we think in this standpoint. We'll show you in a moment about how this would come together. But if you saw this, would you stop it? If you saw violence occurring in your workplace, would you jump right in? And the answer is, of course. But it's happening today with bullying on social media, whether it's an aggressive employee or a supervisor involved, that information is there. So when we think about this, we're looking at a perspective. We see a lot of things externally, and so we'd have a telescope or being able to look out. Social media allows us to look internally with what's going on. It's a chance for us to have a different level of view to see where the problems might happen, or in the case of that X-ray or CAT scan, to look and see where the blockages or problems might occur. So think about social media as providing you that internal perspective of what's going on within your organization. So in coming back to this, there needs to be an intelligent risk watch within your organization. You need to have that intelligence passed, if you're a large company, to your security, if you're a smaller company, into your management structure to be able to deal with it and to carry forward. So your employee safety, your preparedness, and your reputation are assets that are going to be potential targets. If people are saying things, that's going to make a big difference about how your company is perceived and what you need to carry forward. And the risks have greatly escalated with the acceptance of social media and its use. And we're seeing in many cases traditional media using social media and reacting to that and communicating it. So that's the beginning of where these elements are concerned. So are you positioned to respond to a threat or a risk before? Your company is at specific risk, and if you don't put a plan in this place, if you don't have an area, now we're not following good practices, and your company is not aligning with standards and best practices. It's an issue that you need to come to terms with. There are warning signs, and these warning signs are occurring right now out on social media as you would come together. So social media is changing things. It's a risk factor, and we think about social media mostly as a marketing tool that we want to be able to reach and get messages out to our people or market to our customers or carry a standpoint back. But it's changed because things can come out, and once they're there, it's viewed as real or true, even if in cases it's not. It creates challenges for how we control that message. And as we go forward, it certainly increases an exposure to your operations, to your employees, and the risk factors are very great. The other advantage of this is that when we know what's coming, then we gain something valuable, and that's the time to respond. If we're waiting until it just occurs, then it's too late for us to do it. So let's start to now go through and talk about how we put a program together. And we want to establish a framework of overarching policies that defines the goals of the program. What are we concerned about? What kinds of things are we going to want to look for? Where do we go? What tools do we need to use? Who has the responsibility within our organization as we carry forward? We're going to be looking for specific things, and until we define those, it's going to be very difficult to make that process work. So what we're seeing from regulators is that there's an expectation of management of risk, and that companies must manage the potential risk associated with the use here. By the way, those quotes came directly out of the FFIEC in looking at financial institutions and how banks are regulated within that area. We've seen this migrate from FINRA regulating stockbrokers to the SEC with public companies and investment advisors to the financial sector. We're seeing individual regulators in the insurance space and others now carrying this together. So it's clearly risen to a level of best practices. So when we talk about intelligence actions, those 5 words at the bottom of this page, we need to identify, we need to monitor, we need to measure, we need to act, and we need to control. And so we need to identify what's going on, what we need to be looking for. We have to monitor on a 24/7 basis because social media is there. We then can measure and look at the trend lines. Is the threat increasing? Is it decreasing? We have to act, and then we have to control what's going on in each of those areas. Now, if we look at a plan, this is an outline for a social media risk program within that is the best practice today. It's made up of these 8 elements. First, there has to be a governance structure. Ultimately, either the board within the company or the senior officers, generally the office of the president, it has responsibility for a governance structure here. You have to have policies and procedures in place. Policies are the what you do. Procedures are the how you do it as that comes together. By the way, you're responsible for third parties. So if you have contractors and they make postings or comments or release information, you're held accountable for that, and so you need to do due diligence on those contractors that you would have. So ultimately your supply chain, your strategic partners, all of those would come in place. There's an expectation of training your employees. You must provide guidance to them on the use of social media, what's permissible and what's not permissible. We were working with one client that we're doing monitoring, and we saw the contractor drinking beer on the roof. He posted a selfie, and that information was out. And so, again, one of the things we're seeing that this is moving from just being a security issue to becoming an operational issue. We had another account where some customers had apparently gotten locked in at night inadvertently, and when they were working their way back out, the cleaning crew was laughing at them. And so obviously there was a great deal of backlash associated with it. Oversight for monitoring. There's a responsibility here that while you may have someone at one level within monitoring within the company, again, going back to the board or the president, there has to be oversight of that going on. There has to be an audit compliance, and if you're a large organization, this would be an internal audit function. And when you think about audit compliance, it's how do you know and are you sure? Those are the questions that come back, and so we're seeing internal audit starting to take a very active role here. And then finally, reports come back to the board or the president. Again, that governance structure that's listed. And finally, a periodic review of what's going on. So as we're thinking about, if you're thinking about establishing a social media risk program, this would be just like establishing a workplace violence program or a communicable illness or a business continuity program. There's defined sections, there's roles and responsibilities, there's goals and objections. You need to have control in the implementation process as you would move through in that area. As thinking about this from an intelligence network standpoint, here are some of the musts that you need to think about. You would need to be able to receive alerts 24/7. This could be by email or text message, so that if something was coming in that you would immediately know about it. There's a variety of tools here at a variety of price points, and so this is an investment that can be made that is not prohibitive. And in an organization, that could range from just as cheap as $1 an hour to be able to handle this to a few dollars an hour to to be able to have these things in place. Conversation maps will start to show us who's talking to whom about what and what the sentiment of those things would be. You also need to have some ability to be able to go back in time, have an internal time machine, so that if you want to go back and see what's been happening with these individuals over a period of time, you would need those capabilities built into it. Reporting, custom search areas, terms vary and differ as you're going. Geo-distribution data, where are these comments coming from? The ability to set up a fence and then go into that particular area and find out who the contacts are that are involved. Think again about creating your own intelligence network and how this would come into play and work with it. Multiple users, because within your organization you would combine folks from HR as well as security. Also your crisis management team and business continuity folks would need to be involved as we go forward. Quick visual analysis and reporting certainly helps. The report scheduling and templates. Sentiment analysis starts to help us interpret tone of what's going into these areas. And we will generally look at things like streams, phrases, and words. Now let me explain that a little bit. A stream is made up of a series of phrases. So normally a stream has 10 phrases in it, and a phrase is made up of words. There's normally 3 words in a phrase. So if you were saying the name of your company in gun, could in fact be a stream to find messages that have those 2 words in them, and you would be alerted to that. There could be threat, there could be shooting, there could be attack. You would work on creating what these streams would mean and then be measuring them in that period of time, because this will be where you get the intelligence report that in fact becomes actionable. You'd be looking at volumes and statistics, and then the workflow management. When this report comes in, who does it go to? What action are they going to take in coming together at this standpoint? So as we look at social media risk management, think about the fact you're now building an actionable intelligence network to increase the security and response of your organization. So what you want to do here when you're thinking about an intelligence risk watch is to understand what's being said, who's saying it, why are they saying it. You want to engage as appropriate. Now recognize in some of these cases these things may or may not be true. So we have to monitor and then determine, and then who's listening within each of these areas, measure this and act. If you have knowledge, then you must act on that knowledge and carrying it forward as we work through looking at each of these individual areas. Now, it's no longer enough to think of it just as marketing. You've got to carry forward, because you're not looking at the risk factor here. So if you and you're just doing your business impact analysis have not included social media risk as a threat here, you have a gap that you need to address as we carry forward. So when you think about it, these are the steps that you would have to go through in building this intelligence network. You first need to establish a baseline. So it's not a matter that you turn this on and just walk away. And that would normally take anywhere from 30 to 90 days to understand, here's the base level of communications within our organization via social media and related to it. If suddenly you see a spike, that's an indicator to you, that delta, that change, that something's going on and you must become involved. So the baseline is really the first step as we would go forward and establishing access. You've got to have 24/7 access to this to view the streams and modify. As you pick up other factors that are coming forward, you would want to know about it. By the way, social media could be a source of information about your products and services leaving your company, or the ability to determine if you have a quality problem. For those of you who are, have a commitment to quality as a regular portion and you're following ISO standards around it, The new ISO standards that go into effect next year for quality include risk, and that risk can obviously be detected by social media. Now, in addition to access, you want to be able to get those alerts quickly, and it says the word school there, but put your company name at that particular point. You want to have multiple views so you can see how these streams are routed. For example, maybe during the business day, the stream is routed into your risk department or your HR department. Overnight, when everyone goes home, the stream may need to be redirected to your security so that they're aware of what's going on within that area. So the ability to segment who views what when becomes a key element. Regular reports coming out, and our recommendation is that this is at least on a weekly basis, and then the ability to call up on demand, and then the archive. Download so that you can go back and do an analysis if you uncover another fact that you would need to know, the ability to edit and change the streams and words, and then an annual review, just as you would with any program, to make sure that it still meets your needs. So here's an example of just what would happen in the creation of a baseline. All of these steps would need to go through and be completed and established as you would carry forward. So it's like anything else. You don't jump into it and turn on the switch and suddenly you've met all of those areas. But establishing the objectives, the metrics, documenting the base streams and scenarios. You want to generate those master streams, establish how you select the formats, create the baseline. I would do it on 15 days because what we find is that you adjust it, and it probably will take you that 15 to 30 days to have a system that you would really want to carry forward. As you carry it along, the next phase would be to train others within your organization to be able to handle and maintain that stream and carry it forward. And then finally, to have it in a run mode carrying forward in that area. So as you look at designing it, this is not a one-size-fits-all. It's a process where you need to be clearly understanding what's occurring and building this program within it, and the predict, plan, perform leads you through it. So as we think about defining the network and we see the questions that start to come in that would be here, what are your requirements to manage social media risk? What are the objectives of your social media use? What are the performance drivers and what is their relative importance? Managing the overlaps and gaps. How will we add new tools? Who will lead the discovery? What role should each team member play? What are the specific risks to each stakeholder group? What risks are inherent to social media? What risks are associated with the application of each tool? This is more than a Google search to understand. What's the likelihood of a risk occurring? What's the potential impact that these risks pose? What are the tools that you need to use and track? And then can your social media approach be designed to reduce or eliminate risk? And that is the goal within every organization that's doing this. This is a direct factor. What are the strategies that will have a lower risk profile? What mitigation strategies are possible for each risk as they're identified? What are the risk trade-offs involved? What strategies exist to minimize the disruption? And what techniques and approaches are thought leaders using? So as we go through and talk about defining the framework, identifying the risk, and managing and mitigating those risks, you can see how it comes together to build an intelligence network within your organization. This is the next gen as we think about business continuity. As we talk about in the past, where we focused heavily on traditional exposures, the fire, the flood, the tornado, the winter storm, the workplace violence event. Now we're talking about an event that has at its genesis this role in social media. It could be the identification of a violence threat. It could be a security threat. All of those are indications, and that information is seen via social media. In working with one of our strategic partners, they were involved in a particular event that was occurring, And in monitoring the social media that was going on around the event, and looking at all the people that were involved, ultimately they were to identify persons of interest, persons that had a potential for risk associated with it. So the social media, by looking at the tone of the messaging and who the communications channels were to, and the contact factors that were there, then there was a risk ranking that could be associated with everyone that was involved. So only those individuals that posed the greatest risk you needed to have follow-up associated with. And in the ability to even go further, that you could identify not only who the individuals were, but where they were and who they had interacted with. And so creating this intelligence network, just like you have at your plant today, or your company today, you've got video cameras. You have some surveillance to see who's coming in and who's going out, who's involved in what area within our organization. Think of that same video monitoring and security aspect, except now instead of looking at a visual image, imagine you're looking at them on the internet, to know that these people are sending these messages out, and you would have access to that information through the proper tools and designing a program that would come together. So as we think now about this type of an area, here are the takeaways I'd like you to have from today's conversation. Your company's active. Your employees are active. Your community is active. Everyone is active on social media. Just because you're not a major player and sender of information doesn't mean that those that work with you are not. It's easy to become fooled by the informality of social media and the limitations that's associated with it, but it's amazing the information that you can find. We're seeing this move heavily into the insurance industry to detect insurance fraud with the information that can be gleaned from these particular channels. You need to know what's being said, and there's an expectation here. Today there's an expectation of management of risk. If it's being said in a public area about you, your company, your employees, your customers, then it's expected that you will know what's going on in those areas. And not only are you expected to know that next step, number 4, then there's an implication of what those posts might be, and you have to act now on them. It's not a situation. Firestorm specializes in crisis management and consequence management, as Bill shared at the beginning of our broadcast today. We go into an event after something horrible has happened, and you will hear people say, if we'd only known, except for. What we're seeing with social media is this removes the if-only comments, because now you would have known, and you can know, and you can act, and it will make a difference. The 5th is you've got to monitor. You've got to monitor. You've got to monitor. And it's the online presence of the company, of our employees, what's going on, what's being said. Those are the issues that we need to carry forward at any point in time. Obviously, establish rules of conduct and areas of what's going to be said and posted. We don't want to have statements being said about clients or information or even employees that we want to establish there. So clearly having a policy that's signed by employees, and it becomes part of your code of conduct built into your HR departments and the guidelines and rules. Obviously, you want to maintain confidentiality. Just because it's on social media, it may not be true, and so we need to review that information before we act and handle it just as we would any other piece of HR information that comes to it. You need to appreciate social media's reach. This is common knowledge and out across the marketplace. That information is widely held. And one of the things that we're seeing is that the Homeland Security strategy of see something, say something. Repeatedly, we'll find these events where multiple people had actually seen it, but no one had communicated it nor acted on it. So the circle of this information flowing out is very, very great. Social media is media. Traditional media monitors social media and uses it and reacts as if it were a proven fact, and will be treating it. We're seeing it used in broadcast and information, in investigative reporting and contact areas. Those are areas that you would need to be aware of. A shameless self-plug there is you need to retain an expert. If not Firestorm, someone like Firestorm that can help you structure, evaluate the varying monitoring tools that can be used, and to know where the strengths and weaknesses are with each of the individual tools. You did an evaluation at your company and location when you selected a security firm that put in the alarms or the cameras or the monitoring that's going on within it, and you evaluated, here are the best people to work with in those areas. So if you've invested in a physical security system, then you need to invest in a social media intelligence network so that you have that same flow of information, just like you'd have the flow from your monitoring as it would come together. If you would like some more information on this, we would certainly be glad to share, or if you want an analysis of where your business continuity plan is relative to standards and best practices, that's been underwritten by the Rochester Business Alliance. It's a $2,500 value, and you can have clearer insights into where you stand with those particular areas. Or if you wanted to have a conversation about social media risk intelligence, we would be glad to do that. Our thanks to the Rochester Business Alliance for underwriting this Crisis Coach series. We try to bring you a topic each month related to issues and trends that we're seeing in the marketplace and what you would need to be involved. Hopefully today you've gotten a little bit of an insight in terms of what's involved in the world of social media risk, the fact that regulators now on a state and federal basis are starting to require these programs in various industries. But even if they're not, it's been documented and shown that that information that is actionable is available to you. And currently, if you don't have such a program, you have a gap in coverage at this point. It's the equivalent of leaving your building unlocked at night is probably not a safe business practice in most of the United States. I would say that you're leaving your social media window unlocked at night if you're not monitoring what's being said about your employees, your company, your products, your brand, and your customers. So this is part of the Rochester Business Alliance and Firestorm Crisis Coach webinar series. If you would like to watch past webinars, you can go to firestorm.com, or you can go there and register for future webinars. If there's a topic that you would like to have more information on or have one of in the webinar series added, please let either Firestorm or the Rochester Business Alliance know, and we'll include that in our series as we move forward. You can reach us at either going to firestorm.com and filling out a contact form, or you could drop us an email at webinars@firestorm.com, or pick up the phone and give us a call at 800-321-2219, and we'd be glad to help. There's a great many things going on in our businesses every single day. We are wanting to make our environment for our employees as safe as we possibly can. As you think about doing a workplace violence program within your organization, or establishing a behavioral threat risk assessment program to identify those risks, monitoring social media is a primary and necessary tool to be able to understand what's happening. That information is available if you would only look. There are a series of tools to select. Each has strengths, each has weaknesses. This is not cost prohibitive. It is an essential element as a part of your overall planning. It also goes back to relate to brand and reputation, and we're seeing now that boards are increasingly focusing on these areas, and it's becoming an area that with regulators requiring, it's becoming an annual audit requirement to be met also. So thank you today for joining us for the webinar. As Bill said, I think this is the 13th in the series, so next month we'll hit number 14 as we continue to move forward and share information with you each week. Have a great day, and I've enjoyed our time together. Goodbye.